Now, what was so special about it? What does this Akhenaten have to do? Why am I rambling so much when I'm supposed to be talking about black Jews? Well, you see me here inside the king's chamber, inside of the Great Pyramid. I'm in the king's chamber. In the king's chamber, you see this stone box in front of me. This granite box is not a sarcophagus. This granite box is part of the technology of the inner workings of the Great Pyramid. And this granite box has a giant chunk missing out of this corner, facing the screen, the front of the screen here. That giant chunk of granite flew off and flew across the room and struck the other granite on the wall about 20 feet away and left an indentation of its exact shape in that wall. What did that? A high energetic explosion, because in here, this is where fusion reaction happened. This is where the power stepped up and then burst through the top, through the apex of the Great Pyramid. But it all really was, the energy burst was created here. And what did it hold? It held the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of the Covenant is a real piece of technology. Scientists at universities and other engineers have recreated the Ark of the Covenant based on simple instructions that are actually inside the Bible, and created something that was drawing so much power. It's like a giant capacitor. The university had to shut it down because it was pulling all the power out of the local area. And the engineers had to even shut it down because it was just too much power. It's getting ready to create a major power outage. That's how much power this thing was able to generate. From basic, simple instructions they create. You can look those videos up on YouTube. They actually exist, right? And so the box I'm standing in front of, this sits inside of it. It's the exact same dimensions. Why would they put this inside of it? Well, the reason why this box was added to the pyramid long after it was already built is because part of the pyramid technology had broken. The pyramid used to have water running underneath it from the Nile. The Nile used to run right up close to the Great Pyramid. Over time, well, one reason because of a war that happened, the Second Pyramid War, and then a dam was built. Two reasons why the Nile shifted away from that area and left it dry and barren. But the tubules that go underneath the pyramid where the water would flow from the aquifer is still there, because you can actually walk inside of them when you go around and underneath the pyramid. I know, because I've been there. Now, what's interesting about this, when water would flow under the magnetized granite base of the pyramid in the aquifer, it would create something called physiostatic electricity. And this physiostatic electricity will pull ions up into the pyramid and then shoot them up through the grand gallery, which had resonating rods, which have now been removed, but we can see the slots where they were. Then it would be shoved into the king's chamber where I'm standing, and some type of fusion reaction would happen. And that would be the power burst that would then get sent through the apex with the gold capstone and then transmitted out wireless electricity to the region. And the crystal granite magnetized obelisk would capture that ambient energy. And if you had a JED pillar, which is like a Tesla coil, with a cable connected to it, which we've seen in Egypt when I took people to the underground crypt at Dendera, you can then power things like light bulbs, electroplating devices, and so forth and so on. Okay? Powerful stuff. Now, the reason why I'm saying all this is because when Akhenaten was kicked out of Egypt, he took this with him. He went into the Great Pyramid and snatched it and took it with his followers into the desert. Okay, this is why I believe that he's really the true Moses of the Bible. He's the one that actually fled with the people that became known as the Jews, the black Jews. Because why? Moses went down into Ethiopia, became known as the land of Moses. So the word Kushi or Cush is generally used in the Hebrew Bible to refer to a dark-skinned person of African descent. Jewish rabbinical literature uses Kushite to mean black African people in general. Okay? 19th century Christian missionaries found that this group celebrated Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, and Passover, and they also slaughtered a lamb at Passover and knew that the first 5 books of the Bible and some of the apocryphal books excluded from the Hebrew scripture by the Talmudic rabbis because they basically had doubtful authenticity. So they knew about all this. And it's hard to imagine how the customs of Beta Israel could so closely resemble pre-Talmudic Judaism in Palestine if this group's origins were at the time of the Exodus. So what this means, guys, is this. These black Jews existed before the Talmud. They existed before the Torah. These were the original Jews, I believe, in my opinion, that were even possibly followers of this Akhenaten, who fled out of Egypt, took the Ark of the Covenant with him, which is why the Egyptians had to send the chariots after them, because they realized they took the source of Egypt's power, gone, and without that they would fall back into darkness. So they went after him to try to get it. Now, when you look at the translations of Moses crossing the Red Sea, if you go back into the root words in the original text, go back into Aramaic, you discover something. They did not cross the Red Sea. That's been a big mistake, I'm gonna call it that nicely, by Christian churches and synagogues all over the world, talking about the Old Testament where Moses crossed the Red Sea. He actually never crossed the Red Sea. He crossed the Sea of Reeds. It's a mistranslation, maybe by accident or on purpose, I'm not sure. But he crossed the Sea of Reeds, a much closer and much smaller and easier sea to actually cross. Okay. He took the ark with him, escaped into the desert, and from there, of course, you know the rest of the story. He went to Mount Sinai and went to the top, had a word with God, talked to a burning bush. When he came, now he was given the 10 Commandments. Those 10 Commandments come from the 42 laws of Mayat, or the 42 ideals of Mayat, which I've read multiple times on YouTube and Instagram and everywhere else, and TikTok. That's the origins of the 10 Commandments. So obviously that story has been a little bit remixed. But when he comes down, one of the main commandments in those tablets is do not kill, right? And as soon as he comes down, he's unhappy with the way his tribes are acting, so he decides to kill. I mean, he killed about a few hundred people just then. So he just got the command and then he disobeyed the command. I don't know. And then he claimed it was God that, under the name of God, I'm going to kill you people because you're screwing up out here. I mean, this religion is just, you got to be careful with religion. It can really twist your brain up if you're not really understanding and you're not rooted and grounded properly. If you become fanatical, it can really do some damage. So these Jews come down, they start getting into the desert. You know the story about Moses wandering the desert for 40 years and all this stuff. What really happened was a lot of tribes were lost. People split up and went their separate ways. Some ended up in Germany, Poland, Russia, England, Europe, UK, I'm sorry. Some went into Asia, some went into Africa, and we know the ones in Africa, Ethiopia, right? We know that Moses went down into Ethiopia and married an Ethiopian woman. And from there, I'm pretty sure, began to pass on all these teachings of the Jewry to these people. And that became a Jewish nation because he brought along with him people from Egypt. He then was already down there meeting up with these people. He's married now into these Ethiopians, and it becomes a new Jewish nation from scratch, formed right there with all the original traditions that they had established pre-Talmud in existence already. Okay. And just again, looking at Akhenaten's family, you can see clearly that they're all black. And Moses married a black woman. It's very clear. It's very extremely clear in the text that Moses married a black woman. They made sure to say that he married a Kushite, which means black woman. He married a black woman there. And so, and started a whole lineage. And it really, in my opinion, is Pharaoh Akhenaten. It just makes the most sense based on what I know historically that has happened in the area. And you won't believe where they are now, right? Did they disappear? Did they assimilate into other societies? Were they persecuted or wiped out? Because of persecution over the centuries in many of the countries in which they now live, many hid their Jewish heritage by practicing their faith in secret. Some are locally known to be Jewish and suffer prejudice and persecution because of it, but they have only recently become known to the rest of the world. In the last 75 years or so, Jewish communities have become known in Ethiopia, Zimbabwe, India, and even in China and other surprising countries. Even more surprising to some is that members of the lost tribes living in these countries look like any other people that are native to those regions. So now we're talking about the fact that they've literally spread into so many cultures and embedded themselves in so many cultures, and through breeding over and over again, many generations, it's hard to even tell. Now they actually have blended completely in with the people from those regions and those areas. Okay, so they literally have spread around the entire planet and have blended in with everyone. All right.
By Compendium of the Emerald Tablets by Billy Carson.